In 480 BC, the world witnessed one of the most famous last stands in history, the Battle of Thermopylae. King Leonidas I of Sparta, leading only 300 of his finest warriors and a few thousand allies, faced the colossal Persian army under Xerxes I. The odds were impossible, yet the Spartans held their ground, turning a narrow mountain pass into a wall of death for the invaders. For 2 days, Leonidas's men fought with unmatched precision and courage, slaughtering waves of Persians who charged into the narrow corridor. The strategy was brilliant. The terrain neutralized the enemy's numbers, but betrayal changed everything. A Greek traitor named Ephialtes revealed a secret path to the Persians, allowing them to attack from behind. Leonidas knew the end was coming. Refusing to flee, Leonidas sent most of his allies away and prepared to fight to the death. Surrounded on all sides, the Spartans fought with shattered swords, broken spears, and even their bare hands. They refused to surrender. When the final assault came, Leonidas was cut down under a hail of arrows, his body pierced and broken. King Xerxes, furious at the resistance, ordered Leonidas's head severed and his body displayed as a warning. But it backfired. His death inspired Greece to unite and eventually drive out the Persians. Leonidas didn't just die a soldier's death, he became a legend whose defiance defined the meaning of courage. Marcus Licinius Crassus was a man who had everything: power, money, and influence. As the richest man in Rome and a member of the first triumvirate with Julius Caesar and Pompey, his ambition was boundless. But what he lacked was military glory. In 53 BC, craving fame, Crassus led an invasion of Parthia, confident his wealth and legions would secure another Roman triumph. What he faced instead was disaster. At the Battle of Carrhae, his legions were surrounded by Parthian horse archers who unleashed a deadly storm of arrows. The Romans, unprepared for such tactics, were slaughtered under the blazing sun. Crassus's army collapsed in confusion, and he was forced into desperate negotiations. The Parthians, mocking his greed, demanded he bow before their general. When Crassus refused, he was seized and executed in a display that would become legend. Ancient accounts claim molten gold was poured down his throat, a brutal metaphor for a man consumed by wealth. Whether true or exaggerated, the story captured his fall perfectly. Crassus's death shattered Rome's political balance. The alliance with Caesar and Pompey crumbled, paving the way for civil war and the death of the Republic. His greed for glory ended not with triumph, but with humiliation, and a death fit for a tragic figure of history. On June 25, 1876, General George Armstrong Custer led his cavalry into what he believed was a small Native American camp along the Little Bighorn River. Instead, he stumbled into one of the largest Native coalitions ever assembled. Thousands of Lakota Sioux, Cheyenne, and Arapaho warriors led by Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse. It was the beginning of one of the most brutal final stands in American history. Custer, known for his arrogance and impulsive tactics, split his forces, thinking he could surround the encampment. Within hours, his men were overwhelmed. The gunfire was relentless, arrows filled the sky, and chaos consumed the battlefield. Custer's detachment fought desperately, but the warriors closed in from every direction. When the battle ended, Custer and all 210 of his men lay dead. Their bodies were stripped, scalped, and mutilated according to native war traditions. Custer was found with 2 gunshot wounds, one to the chest and another to the head. Historians still debate whether he was killed by the enemy or by his own hand to avoid capture. The massacre shocked the United States and became known as Custer's Last Stand. To the native tribes, it was a moment of victory and resistance. To the U.S. military, it was a sobering lesson in arrogance and underestimation. Custer's death became legend, a cautionary tale of pride meeting its downfall in a storm of blood and dust. Alexander Suvorov was one of the greatest military minds in Russian history, a commander who never lost a battle across more than 60 campaigns. Known for his unconventional tactics and brutal efficiency, Suvorov crushed his enemies from Poland to Italy during the late 18th century, but his death in 1800 was shrouded in irony and mystery. After years of loyal service, Suvorov fell out of favor with Tsar Paul I, whose jealousy and paranoia grew toward the aging general's fame. Exiled to his estate and stripped of honors, Suvorov's health began to decline rapidly. Some say the humiliation killed him more than illness ever could. He died in St. Petersburg, not on a battlefield, but broken by betrayal. His soldiers wept openly at his funeral, crying out, "The father of the army is dead." His body was buried with the simple epitaph, "Here lies Suvorov." It was all he ever wanted, humility in death after a life of glory. Though his end was quiet, his legend roared on. Even Napoleon Bonaparte once admitted, he was a great man. The mystery of his final days remains a haunting contrast to a life defined by fire and steel. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, known as the Desert Fox, was one of Nazi Germany's most respected and cunning commanders during World War II. His lightning-fast tactics in North Africa earned him global fame and even the respect of his enemies. But behind the propaganda and medals, Rommel's fate was sealed by his disillusionment with Adolf Hitler. By 1944, after the failed July 20th plot to assassinate Hitler, Rommel's name appeared on the list of suspected conspirators. Hitler's regime faced a problem. Rommel was too beloved to publicly execute. Instead, they offered him a cruel choice: suicide by poison or a sham trial that would destroy his family. On October 14, 1944, Rommel chose death. He was given a cyanide capsule and told his wife and son goodbye. Minutes later, he was dead. The Nazis announced he had died of war wounds, and he was given a full state funeral. Rommel's death remains one of the most tragic and complex of the war, an honorable soldier trapped in a dishonorable regime. In the end, the Desert Fox became a martyr, remembered not for his allegiance, but for the courage to face death on his own terms. In 1941, the architect of Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor, Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, met a violent and ironic end. As Japan's most brilliant naval strategist, he had masterminded the surprise strike that brought the US into World War II, but 2 years later, the hunter became the hunted. The US had cracked Japan's secret communication codes through Operation Vengeance. When intelligence revealed Yamamoto's inspection flight route across the Solomon Islands, American pilots were dispatched on a daring mission to intercept him. On April 18, 1943, P-38 Lightning fighters ambushed his plane over the jungle of Bougainville. Yamamoto's transport was riddled with bullets, crashing into the dense forest below. When soldiers later found the wreck, they discovered his body still seated upright, his white-gloved hand clutching his sword, a general who had met death with stoic calm. His death dealt a crushing psychological blow to Japan. The empire lost not only its greatest strategist, but its sense of invincibility. For the US, it was justice delivered from the skies, a poetic end for the man who had once vowed to awaken a sleeping giant. King Pyrrhus of Epirus was one of the most ambitious military minds of the ancient world. Known for the phrase, Pyrrhic victory, his triumphs were so costly they nearly destroyed him. By 272 BC, Pyrrhus had waged war across Italy, Sicily, and Greece, chasing glory that always came at a terrible price. But his death would prove even more ironic than his life. During his campaign in Argos, Pyrrhus found himself in a fierce street battle. Charging through narrow alleys, he pursued a soldier into a courtyard when fate intervened. From above, an elderly woman, watching the chaos unfold, dropped a heavy roof tile from her window. It struck Pyrrhus in the head, stunning him. Moments later, a soldier finished him with a blade. The great conqueror was dead. When his men found their king's body, disbelief turned to horror. A man who had battled Rome itself was undone not by sword or spear, but by a falling brick. Historians saw it as poetic justice, a cruel twist of fate for a man who believed destiny bowed only to warriors. Pyrrhus's story remains one of history's most bizarre endings. A king who once stood shoulder to shoulder with legends met his end at the hands of chance, proving that no general, however brilliant, can outmaneuver fate. Richard I of England, better known as Richard the Lionheart, was Europe's quintessential warrior king. Revered for his valor during the Third Crusade, he was the embodiment of medieval glory. But in 1199, his story ended not in a grand battle, but outside a small French fortress called Chalus-Chabrol, in an encounter that would seal his fate. While inspecting the castle's defenses, Richard spotted a defiant crossbowman mocking him from the walls. Smiling, the king rode closer, daring the man to shoot. The bolt struck him in the shoulder, a wound that seemed minor at first, but infection spread quickly. Within days, the Lionheart, whose sword had clashed with empires, was dying. In his final act of mercy, Richard ordered that the archer be spared and released, even as he lay in agony. Yet the man who had conquered kingdoms could not conquer his own body's betrayal. On April 6, 1199, the Lionheart was gone, his roar silenced forever. His death sent shockwaves across Europe. The legend who had fought for God and glory fell not to a worthy foe, but to a random shot. It was a humbling reminder that even kings of iron meet fragile human ends. Charles XII of Sweden, the warrior king, was born for the battlefield. Leading his armies from the front during the Great Northern War between 1700 and 1721, he became both feared and admired for his courage. By 1718, Sweden's once great empire was crumbling, and Charles led one last desperate campaign against Norway. During the siege of Fredriksten Fortress, Charles personally oversaw the front lines, standing in the trenches despite freezing winds and flying bullets. Then, as he leaned over the rampart, a single shot pierced his skull. He died instantly. The source of the bullet, enemy fire, or an assassin within his own ranks, remains one of history's great mysteries. When his soldiers found him, his lifeless body was still upright, his face calm, as though he had accepted death mid-command. The bullet had entered one temple and exited the other, clean, precise, final. Charles's death ended Sweden's dominance and marked the fall of its empire. His reign, filled with fearless victories and reckless ambition, ended in a moment of chilling quiet. Even in death, the warrior king seemed frozen in defiance, gazing forever toward the battlefield he could never leave. In May 1863, during the height of the American Civil War, Confederate General Thomas Stonewall Jackson met one of history's cruelest battlefield fates, killed by friendly fire. Known for his fearless tactics and deep faith, Jackson was considered the Confederate Army's most brilliant strategist, second only to Robert E. Lee, but fate would strike from his own lines. During the Battle of Chancellorsville, Jackson led a daring flanking maneuver that crushed the Union Army's right side. As night fell, he rode ahead of his men to scout enemy positions. In the darkness, nervous Confederate sentries mistook his party for Union cavalry and opened fire. 3 bullets tore through Jackson's arm and hand, shattering bone and muscle. His arm was amputated, and though doctors believed he would recover, pneumonia soon set in. On May 10th, Jackson whispered his final words, "Let us cross over the river and rest under the shade of the trees." His death devastated the South and left Lee mourning the loss of his right hand. Jackson's end was both heroic and tragic, a general who had survived the enemy's fire only to fall to his own. His death proved that even on the battlefield, where discipline reigns supreme, chaos always finds its mark. When Napoleon Bonaparte's empire collapsed in 1815, the men who had carried his banners across Europe became the victims of revenge. Many of his most loyal marshals, heroes of countless victories, were hunted, imprisoned, or executed by the restored monarchies that now ruled France. Their loyalty to Napoleon would cost them their lives. One of the most infamous cases was Marshal Michel Ney, known as the bravest of the brave. After Napoleon's final defeat at Waterloo, Ney was captured by royalist forces and charged with treason for rejoining his emperor during the 100 Days. On December 7, 1815, he faced a firing squad in Paris. Refusing a blindfold, he shouted, "Soldiers, aim straight at my heart," and gave the order to fire himself. Others met similar fates. Joachim Murat, Napoleon's flamboyant cavalry king of Naples, was executed by firing squad after a failed attempt to reclaim his throne. These deaths marked the end of an era, as the revolutionary fire that had swept Europe was extinguished by blood and betrayal. Napoleon's marshals died as they lived, defiant, loyal, and unyielding to the end. Their executions served as a grim reminder that empires do not fall quietly, they drag their legends down with them. Manfred von Richthofen, known to the world as the Red Baron, was the most feared pilot of World War I. With 80 confirmed aerial kills, his scarlet-painted Fokker triplane became a symbol of death in the skies. But on April 21, 1918, the hunter became the hunted over the battlefields of France. While pursuing an Allied plane near the Somme River, Richthofen broke formation and flew too low, unaware he had crossed enemy lines. Ground fire erupted, riddling his aircraft with bullets. Moments later, a single shot pierced his chest, killing him instantly. His plane crash-landed in a field, nose first, its red frame crumpled like a burning banner. Australian troops reached the wreckage first, astonished to find the Red Baron dead but still seated in the cockpit, his face eerily calm. In a rare moment of respect, his enemies buried him with full military honors, laying wreaths that read, "To our gallant and worthy foe." Richthofen's death ended an age of chivalry in the skies. He was just 25 years old, a legend cut down in his prime. Even now, the Red Baron remains the ultimate symbol of valor and mortality colliding in the heart of war. The wars of independence in South America were filled with glory, sacrifice, and unrelenting brutality. Under Simón Bolívar, the liberator, countless soldiers fought to free nations from Spanish rule between 1810 and 1825. But victory came at a terrible cost. Bolívar's men died in droves, often in the most horrific ways imaginable, their blood paving the road to freedom. From the Andean highlands to the jungles of Venezuela, Bolívar's armies marched barefoot, starved, and outnumbered. Disease, exhaustion, and ambushes claimed thousands before they ever reached battle. At Carabobo, Boyacá, and Junín, soldiers fought hand-to-hand with machetes when ammunition ran dry. There was no mercy. Spanish troops executed prisoners, while patriots retaliated with equal fury. One of Bolívar's most trusted officers, Antonio José de Sucre, met his end after the wars in an ambush in 1830. His body, riddled with bullets, became a symbol of betrayal and lost ideals. Their deaths were not in vain. The blood of Bolívar's soldiers carved new nations into existence. Their sacrifice proved that liberty, no matter the price, is never granted. It is seized. General George S. Patton, one of the most feared and admired U.S. commanders of World War II, survived countless battles only to die in a freak accident far from the front lines. On December 9, 1945, while traveling through Germany, Patton's Cadillac collided with an army truck. The impact hurled him forward, breaking his neck and leaving him paralyzed. He was rushed to a military hospital, where doctors fought to save him. For 12 days, the man who had survived tanks, bullets, and air raids lay helpless, unable to move or speak freely. On December 21st, he died quietly, whispering, "It's hell to be old and useless." He was 60 years old. Patton's death sparked endless speculation. Some claimed it was an accident. Others whispered of assassination, alleging he was silenced for criticizing post-war policy toward the Soviets. No evidence ever proved it, but the mystery endures. The general who had commanded with unstoppable energy met his end confined to a hospital bed. His life had been a symphony of motion, his death a haunting silence. Even now, Patton's legend marches on, his defiance echoing long after his final battle. In 1431, at just 19 years old, Joan of Arc, the peasant girl who led France's armies to victory, met one of the most harrowing deaths in history. Captured by Burgundian forces and sold to the English, she was tried for heresy and witchcraft in a sham trial meant to destroy her legend. Her only crime was defying expectations and commanding men in God's name. On the morning of May 30th, in the marketplace of Rouen, Joan was tied to a wooden stake as priests urged her to repent. The flames rose, consuming her body as she prayed for forgiveness. Witnesses said she did not scream until the fire reached her heart. When it was over, her ashes were scattered into the Seine to erase any trace of her. But her execution had the opposite effect. Joan became a martyr, her death inspiring French resistance and eventually leading to her canonization as a saint. Even her English captors reportedly wept as her body burned. Joan's death remains one of the most brutal and symbolic in history. She died not with fear, but with faith, proving that even fire cannot silence a soul destined for immortality. These soldiers became legends, but their deaths remind us that heroism always has a price. Which one shocked you the most? Comment below, and don't forget to subscribe for more History Explained, and thanks for watching.